Hello, Jake Lloyd Bacon here to tell you a little about my podcast, Elaborate. It's not super high concept, it's a talk show in which I sit down with artists, actors, comedians, writers, and more from all walks of life and simply connect. I'm exploring the human condition. I'm trying to figure out why we are, who we are, and how the hell we got here. It's a conversation, it's an interview, it's not therapy, but it is therapeutic. So join me and my guests on Elaborate, available at elaboratepod.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
And welcome back, fellow Quillers, to another exciting episode of your favorite podcast. And I hope this episode becomes one of your all-time favorite episodes. It's one that several of you have requested over time. And so finally, here it is. Welcome to Shakespeare, playwright, and stage director. Now, I know most of you know my background as a Shakespearean producer, director, and actor. I tend to mention it at least once or twice in every episode. It's how I came to love Shakespeare. It's one of the things that brought me to the Shakespeare authorship question. And in more than 25 years of producing theater, I have produced and or directed more than 60 Shakespearean productions, including 24 of the plays, as well as a staged version of Venus and Adonis. As a performer, I've performed roles such as Hamlet, Iago, Henry IV, Petruchio, Oberon Theseus, Julius Caesar, and I served 9 seasons with the Redland Shakespeare Festival as its founding artistic director, 8 years as the producing artistic director of the Archway Theater Company in Los Angeles. And currently, in my home in Southern Oregon, I am directing my 8th production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. I figured it out the other day, and I've been in the show twice under different directors, once in a production that I directed, and now, like I said, this is my 8th time directing. I've spent more than 1,000 hours in rehearsal or in preparation with the text of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Yeah. And it's one of those plays that I'm sure I will, before I die, spend another couple of 100 hours with, because it's just the one that people love the most, that you keep going back to. And it's the most accessible. And it also happens to be one of the ones that I think is most autobiographical, and one of the proofs that the man from Stratford could never have been the author. We're going to talk today about Shakespeare as stage director as more evidence that the Stratford man is definitely not the guy. And as a director and actor who has engaged artistically with 24 titles plus Venus and Adonis, it's important to me as an artist to know all I can about this writer's life, to connect to the plays, the deeply biographical nature of the writing, and to use that as the basis of the foundations for the characters that I create as an actor and that I help other actors create on the stage as a director. That said, the works of Shakespeare are often criticized for their absence of written stage direction. Sans the more than 3,500 entrances and exits, some 250 alorums and flourishes, and 23 instances of they fight. Yes, there are 23 instances that the stage direction just says they fight. The Bard's works otherwise are devoid of any specific instruction to actors. Or are they? In a canon that is best known for its most famous stage direction, exits pursued by a bear, which comes from The Winter's Tale, is there any other evidence that the author of the works had experience as a stage director, or even understood the importance of proper stage direction when it came to the performance of his plays, or any plays for that matter? So I want to analyze some text from several of the Bard's plays, looking at them from a performance perspective, using various guidelines to acting Shakespeare, which have been established over the centuries as keys to the works. And the stage directions, which I'm going to show you, are actually incorporated directly into the text. Now, I want to note here that my textual references are from the first folio of 1623, which I believe to be the truest available copy that we have of the author's intent with regards to the posterity of the works. And that my reasoning for that is an entirely different episode, so I won't get into that. But that's what I'm using. So those of you who have a first folio or a first folio facsimile, obviously nobody has a first folio. If you have a first folio out there, I want to be your friend. But I have this wonderful Norton facsimile that I actually picked up at a bookstore in Ashland, Oregon several years ago. And I love it. It's one of my prized possessions. We're going to look at the author's use of meter and verse, various punctuation, enjambment, shared verse lines, elision, stressed syllables, and specific word choices that he uses to convey to actors the correct way of delivering the lines of the characters presented. Details about the timing of entrances and exits, action points, the rate of speech, particular emphasis, and even the familiarity of relationships between certain characters are all revealed within the text of the lines, which avoids the need for literal written stage directions beyond those we find in the quartos and folios that are often credited to editors and typesetters. Why use precious ink and paper when you can do it all within the text? Why spend all that time writing out specific stage directions like a Neil Simon would in many of his plays of the modern era, when you can place the stage direction directly within the text for the actors to find if they have the key? So in order to do this properly, however, the author has to be not just a brilliant playwright, but also a brilliant stage director with a keen understanding of dramatic value, dramatic effect, and the use of both. The evidence we will explore only serves to further reveal the genius behind these works as a man well-versed in the art of performance. And it is one of the critical reasons why actors today and always have wanted to perform these works, play these roles, and say the words of this writer. Because in the entertainment industry, it is well known that if you can do Shakespeare, you can do anything. Because what you must learn in order to deliver Shakespearean texts correctly can be applied to any other texts, most of which will never be as complex or detailed in their character direction as what you'll find in the Shakespearean canon. As we look at the evidence for this truth, I encourage you to go get your complete works and have it handy and follow along if you wish. I will be telling you different scenes and speeches and monologues from different acts and scenes of certain plays that are going to be very easy for you to find. And if you need to stop and start, which is great because you can do that with a podcast, go ahead and do that. Follow along if you wish, though I think you will be able to enjoy the episode without having the text directly in front of you. It's not a class. But some of you might have fun following along. So let's get started. Here's a pause for you to go grab your complete works. Okay, that's enough. Now, here we go. First lesson I will give you is what I give to Shakespearean actors, and that is ask yourself, why am I saying these words now? Why am I saying these words now? Why has the author given this character these words to speak at this moment? Now, depending on your preferred modern sources, and I get some pushback on this sometimes, and I say, well, you know what? You go look up in your sources, your editions, and your editors, and you tell me what you think the total is, and I'll tell you what I think the total is. And if the specific number is not actually correct, I don't think it takes away from the value of how large the number is regardless. But I have found that there are approximately 31,500 or more different and unique words in the Shakespearean canon. Some 5,000 to 7,000 of those words and distinct phrases have been credited to Shakespeare as being created by him, or at the least, he was the first to put them in print for the very first time. And this is a practice we call neologism. Neo, new, logism, words, new words. According to a Google search of a variety of educational sites and intelligence research data, you'll find this interesting. The common English speaker uses approximately how many? Got a guess? Talk to your neighbor. What'd you come up with? 5,000 words. The common English speaker uses approximately 5,000 words in their regular speech, approximately double that in their writing. For whatever reason, our vocabulary tends to double when we're writing as opposed to when we're actually speaking. That makes sense. Sometimes it's easier to think when you're writing than it is to think when you're speaking on the fly. I find that true in just about every podcast episode. And here's the point of that, though. That's still only 1/3 the total number of words used by our guy, who invented, by some sources, approximately 2,000 more words and phrases than most people you and I know how to use in their daily speech today. This translates into an author who chooses the words he gives to his characters with extreme precision. When he has 31,000 words to choose from at his fingertips, then you have to ask, why did he choose these specific words for this character to say right now? Out of 31,000 words, he chose these. I better understand what they mean. I better understand why I'm saying them. And I better understand what they mean to this character. Now, if you don't know the answer to that question, then you can't hope to deliver the lines in any true conviction or emotional attachment to the lines, and you're not going to be a very good Shakespearean actor. An actor must know why their character is using the words they are using to convey their argument. Among these many words are a number of neological words. Neological. I think I just made up a word. I think I just practiced some neologism there. But you'll get the point. These are new words. What the actor has to understand is that these are words not just written for the first time, or at the least printed on paper for the first time, but also spoken for the first time. You see, these words are not created by the writer. Not in the world of the actor, they're not. In the world of the actor, these words are created by the character in the very moment of the scene as it is taking place before us, the audience. Whether that be in our mind's eye as the reader audience, or it's before our very eyeballs. Yes, that's one of his words that he invented. Yes, it's true. If it's happening right before our very eyeballs as a member of the audience, then we're watching a character invent a word in the moment, not a writer who wrote the word 400 plus years ago. Not if we're truly in that realm of suspension of disbelief and living in the world of the characters we're viewing on the stage. That's important, because these words are not then created because the author merely needed something that fit inside the meter of the verse, but because he needed something that fit inside the meter of the verse that remained true to the thoughts and emotions of the character in that moment of the story. These words are the very first level of stage direction from the author to the actor. They say to the actor, this moment in this character's life is beyond description within the bounds of their existing vocabulary, and thus the character is impelled, not compelled, impelled from within to create a word, to use in that moment, to describe the moment with emotional accuracy. Think about that. How many people do you know that you're in the middle of a conversation with and they start making up words to describe how they're feeling or what they're thinking or what has happened to them? Shakespearean characters do it all the time. It's one of the reasons why we love them. We love their passion for their lives. They're so passionate that they literally make up new words to describe what's happening to them or what they're feeling or thinking. So let's look at a few really good ones that our cat invented. We'll start with a piece from Act 3, Scene 3 of All's Well That Ends Well, where the Duke of Florence uses the word auspicious. Auspicious, conducive to success, derives from the word augury, or in Latin, auspicium, one who looks at birds. All right, so that's an interesting word, and it's an interesting derivation, etymology, as it were. Not entomology, that's bugs. Etymology. And here the Duke of Florence says, "Then go thou forth, and fortune play upon thy prosperous helm as thy auspicious mistress." Yeah. So the Duke of Florence is saying to Bertram, in All's Well That Ends Well, that his mistress, not his concubine mistress meaning Helena, is auspicious, conducive to success. Good for him. And good for him. Now, to be fair, this is not the first time we see the word auspicious used. It is the very first time a character uses it in a play. In fact, the very first recorded use of the word auspicious comes from lines in a poem called The Rape of Lucrece. And it's in this context. "But in the midst of his unfruitful prayer, having solicited the eternal power that his foul thoughts might compass his fair, and they would stand auspicious to the hour, even there he starts. Quoth he, I must deflower. The powers to whom I pray abhor this fact. How can they then assist me in the act?" What do we find here then? At the very least, we know that the Duke of Florence is well read in Elizabethan poetry, and he apparently likes Shakespeare's poetry and knows The Rape of Lucrece quite well. Now, of course, our writer does use the word again in the canon, but to convey the opposite meaning in this most popular line from Act 5, Scene 3 of Romeo and Juliet. "Will I set up my everlasting rest and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh?" So you see, he creates an antonym out of the same word. That's some cool neologism, isn't it? Let's return to All's Well That Ends Well for another example of neologism, this time from Act 5, Scene 3 of that play, where the King of France uses the word equivocal. Equivocal, open to more than one interpretation. Ambiguous, from the Latin equivocus, which means to call equally. And thus the King of France says, "As thou art a knave and no knave, what an equivocal companion is this?" The word also appears in this form when Brabantio uses it in Othello. And of course, the very famous reference from the porter in Act 2, Scene 3 of Macbeth. "Faith, here's an equivocator that could swear in both the scales against either scale, who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. Ooh, come in, equivocator." In this passage, the word is used as a noun and a verb rather than an adjective. That's some pretty monumental neologism going on there. Oh, and speaking of monumental, yeah, that's one of his too. We find that in Act 5, Scene 3 of All's Well That Ends Well, with the second Lord. Monumental, great in importance, extent or size. From the Latin monumentum, from monere, to remind. To remind. Like a monument. So thus the second Lord says, "He hath perverted a young gentlewoman here in Florence of a most chaste renown, and this night he fleshes his will in the spoil of her honor. He hath given her his monumental ring, and thinks himself made in the unchaste composition. The ring isn't monumental in that it is extremely large. It is monumental in that it is there as a reminder, a remembrance. If you know the play, you know that it's been given to him for such purpose." This word also shows up in Othello, however, when he is describing Desdemona's skin as smooth as monumental alabaster. Alabaster, used to build monuments of remembrance. Now, some of those monuments were monumental in size, but it's not until we see the word later in Troilus and Cressida that it is used by Ulysses to describe a monumental mockery, and thus the first use of the word to describe something as being of monumental proportion as it is most commonly used today. Some awesome neologism going on there. Let's move on to one more from Macbeth. For a short play, Macbeth is actually filled with a lot of neologism, often with characters using new words to describe the unexplainable, well, imagine that, or to magnify the extent of their arguments, especially the title character. Here's one of my favorites. It's from Act 2, Scene 2. Multitudinous. Yeah, say that 5 times fast. Multitudinous, 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 multitudinous. Actors often have vocal and facial diction enunciation exercises. The sea ceaseth and sufficeth us. That's one of my favorites. But multitudinous is a nice one, too. It means very numerous, from the Latin multitudo, many. Macbeth says, "Whence is that knocking? How is't with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ah, they pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red." This word also shows up in Coriolanus, where it most likely originates, in that the title character refers to the Roman crowd as the multitudinous tongue, which is more true to its original Latin form and meaning of multitude or many. Look how the neologism can actually help us date the plays and determine which works came before other works, and how a word he has invented, he further elaborates on in subsequent use later on in a different play, in a different context. Kind of cool, isn't it? Now here's a fun one from Act 2, Scene 7 of As You Like It. It is the word pantaloon. Well, modern dictionary says a pantaloon is a Venetian character in Italian commedia dell'arte represented as a foolish old man wearing pantaloons. Italian, pantalone. Jaques uses this word in his famous monologue about the 7 ages of man. You know it, all the world's a stage and all that one. And he says here, The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. The word is used twice in The Taming of the Shrew to describe the old man Gremio, who is indeed the version of an Italian commedia dell'arte pantalone. But it is Jaques who uses it to describe the sixth age of man. So here we have a French philosopher-poet creating a word based on Italian commedia characters. Yes, that. Obviously something the Stratford man must have picked up from the Universal Tavern of Knowledge one day. But let's move on. The next lesson in Shakespearean acting revolves around learning that some otherwise thought common words are actually far from common at all in their meanings and the direction they provide to actors when our author decides to use them. They are but or yet, now, and all. Repeat after me. But or yet, now, and all. These are words that are used by characters to strengthen their arguments. Now, when I use the word argument to describe the dialogue, I always tell actors that it doesn't mean characters are always arguing. No matter how much conflict we as actors want to develop for the drama, that's not what it means. What it means is that every character is making an argument in every speaking moment. An argument to advance their position, their desire, their belief, their intent, their passion, their advice. You name it. It's an argument of persuasion aimed at someone. Another character, the heavens, the fates, the furies, sometimes even the audience, with characters regularly breaking what actors call the fourth wall in order to make their argument. Iago in Othello is great at this. Richard III uses it extremely well, talking directly to us, the audience. In their arguments, characters tend to use four basic forms of rhetoric. Logos, an appeal to logic. Pathos, an appeal to emotion. Ethos, an appeal to ethics. And kairos, an appeal to time. Throughout the Shakespearean canon, we can find nearly every one of, we could definitely find every one of those, and we can also find nearly every one of the 30 identified rhetorical devices. Our author asks his actors to be skilled rhetoricians in identifying their characters' arguments, the character's use of rhetoric, and the character's favorite rhetorical devices. This is extreme analysis that actors must do in order to properly convey the character to the audience. Know the chosen rhetoric style of the character and embrace it. It's important to note that every Shakespearean character, and I mean every Shakespearean character, believes that they are witty. Most especially the ones that are not. I mean, when you think about Bottom the Weaver in A Midsummer Night's Dream, there's a guy who believes that he is the smartest man in the room. He definitely is not. Dogberry, the constable in Much Ado About Nothing, is another great example of a guy who believes he is the smartest man in the room. Andrew Aguecheek believes he is a witty character. The list goes on and on and on. Characters are often trying to be witty, even in the face of tragic events and dramatic moments. We see this a lot in Macbeth, who uses his wit to almost at times laugh at himself when he recognizes the genius of the weird sister's riddle-filled prophecies to him. And so, speaking of Macbeth, one of my favorite arguments, speaking of arguments and characters making arguments, one of my favorite arguments is the most famous moment when Lady Macbeth uses argument and rhetoric to convince her husband to murder King Duncan. She uses an argument steeped mostly in pathos, as she emasculates her husband and challenges his very manhood in her emotional appeal. But she also uses kairos in her appeal to him, emphasizing the timely opportunity that has presented itself to them. She then further finds strength of argument in logos when she explains how they will perform the deed in such a way as to logically lay the blame on Duncan's guards, and everyone will then logically believe the guards are guilty of the murder. Clever lady. The one element she cannot use, she avoids like the plague: ethos. Because there's nothing ethical about murdering your king. Which is the main argument her husband uses in his soliloquy, which is an argument to himself. But he uses ethos throughout that soliloquy just before her entrance to argue himself out of committing the murder. Ethically based reasons. Beautiful stuff there when you look at it from that angle. Yet. Well, anyway, let's get back to but and yet. There are 6,616 buts and 1,687 yets in the Shakespearean canon. There are also 116 besides, which can serve a similar purpose to but and yet. To this, add various thens and ands, which all offer clues to the actor about when a character wishes to stress a point in their argument, or as a common indicator of a change in rhetorical form or device. It is the author saying to the actor, hey, pay attention to what's happening with this speech right here. Watch how the character shifts thought or changes argument using these key words. We see great examples of this in Macbeth's argument to the murderers in Act 3, Scene 1 of that play. He says, so is he mine, and in such bloody distance that every minute of his being thrust against my nearest of life. And though I could with barefaced power sweep him from my sight and bid my will avouch it, yet I must not. For certain friends that are both his and mine, whose loves I may not drop, but wail his fall, who I myself struck down, and thence it is that I to your assistance do make love, masking the business from the common eye for sundry weighty reasons. Now, if you're following along in the text, you'll also notice how each of these words follow punctuation in the verse, and how in 3 out of 5 instances here, it is a major punctuation symbol, such as a colon or semicolon. But in that short passage, you have 3 ands, a yet, and a but. And most of those coming after a colon or a semicolon, major part of punctuation. But we'll get back to punctuation in just a bit. But remember that, it's important. Let's move on to the importance of now. Now. There are 2,933 nows in the Shakespearean canon. And I instruct actors to always stress the word now. Our author commonly uses the word now to bring audience focus to the moment by emphasizing the immediate importance of the moment through the character's use of that word. In Shakespeare's world, now always means right at this instant. Not 2 minutes ago, not 3 minutes from now, but now, right now. As in, now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York. And I'm not happy about it. And here's what I'm already doing to change it. And then Richard III tells us the evil plans he already has in motion right as the play begins. It's one of the most brilliant dramatic openings of a play ever. In that single word, now, and not the word discontent, we are brought to focus on the moment. It's the word now that makes us realize Richard's discontent, as well as the time of the day. Not the time of the day, oh, it's 3 o'clock. Now it's 3 o'clock. No, now in the land, war has ended. Everybody's peaceful and happy. And what we learn about Richard is he's not happy unless war is happening. He's not made for dancing and partying and having a good time. He tells us so. So he's going to change it. It's brilliant. How about this one? Now could I drink hot blood and do such bitter business as the day would quake to look on, says Hamlet. Now, finally, I'm ready to take action, and some people are going to die for it, he says at this very important turning point in that play. The wishy-washy melancholy Dane suddenly says, now I'm going to act. It's a brilliant moment, and that word now is so crucially important to the shift in what he does from that point forward in the play. Less impactful than those two examples, but just as important in the delivery of the line, is this moment in Act 1, Scene 3 of As You Like It, when Celia and Rosalind are plotting Celia's escape from the palace to go with her now exiled cousin Rosalind into the forest of Arden. Celia says, let's away and get our jewels and our wealth together, devise the fittest time and safest way to hide us from pursuit that will be made after my flight. Now, go in we content to liberty and not to banishment. Again, for those following at home, here we see this key word follows a major punctuation mark, again, a colon. And we see a piece of actual written stage direction at the end of a rhyming couplet, which is also, by the way that our author tells actors, get off the stage. I just ended with a rhyming couplet. I should exit now. Look for that. Look for that the next time you're reading any of the plays. Rhyming couplet, time to go. It's all in there. See what I did there? It's all in there, because that's what we're going to talk about next. All. There are 4,010 alls in the canon, and just as now means right now, all means all. Not just some, not a few, but all. Everything, as in, I have lost all, or all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Oh, wait a minute. That's not Shakespeare. That's Mother Goose. Anyway, she doesn't mean half the king's horses and half the king's men. She says all. And when Shakespeare says all, he means all. All the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. Not half the world, not England, not Europe, not China, not North America. Oh, probably not North America. It was the 1590s, after all, when these were being written. But all the world, everything. As in this reference from Act 3, Scene 2 of All's Well That Ends Well, where we find Helena is reading a letter from her, shall we say, estranged husband. And he's cruel in his letter when he writes to her. And he says, till I have no wife, I have nothing in France. And she says, nothing in France until he has no wife? Thou shalt have none, Rosillon. None in France. Then thou hast all again. Everything. And her love is so deep for him that she wants to give him all, even if all means all but her, in order for him to feel that he has all again. It's a beautifully emotional moment in that play. Words. 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 But enough about words for now. Let's look at the use of verse and iambic pentameter, word placement, sentence structure, and punctuation. No, this is not an English class. It's actually an acting class, remember? We call this study scansion, and it is an essential part of preparing a Shakespearean performance. I like to say that our author is like a master composer who uses tools such as these to convey to his musicians, the actors, exactly how to play his tunes in the proper fashion. Now, a musical composer has a myriad of symbols to use to convey very specific directions to each musician: whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, rests, sustains, crescendos, and a plethora of other Italian words. Allegro. But Shakespeare had far fewer options available to convey direction to actors, requiring just as much specificity and importance to the performance of his works, however. So he uses verse. More specifically, he uses iambic pentameter as a means of conveying all kinds of information. So first off, please understand this. And if this upsets you, write to me. But the bottom line is this: iambic pentameter is not just the popular form of verse of the Elizabethan age. It also happens to serve as a very specific code for actors to use to assist them with the delivery of their lines, a code which conveys very specific stage directions to the actors as well. Yes, you heard me. It's not just a popular form of verse. Oh, all the Elizabethans are doing it. Our guy discovered how to use it in such a way as to convey everything he needed to tell actors about how to deliver the lines. And I'm going to explain it to you now. It can be very useful, yes. English teachers out there who are listening, yes. Trochaic, anapestic, spondaic, all that stuff's very useful to somebody. But it isn't very helpful, especially not to actors. And it strays away from the actual intent of the verse as a message to the actor. More important to the actor, instead, are these rules to follow. First, missing beats are never missing. They are there for a purpose: a pause, an entrance, an exit, perhaps an offstage noise to be heard. Here comes the king. 4 beats. The other 6 beats of a 10-beat line are there for the king to actually enter. In many cases, a single missing beat is there to stress a syllable in an important word, such as the most famous example of all time, banished, in Romeo and Juliet. When Romeo uses this word, he almost always has to give it all 3 syllables in order for it to complete the 10-beat line, or it doesn't scan. Banished, punished, even murdered are literally spelled out for the actor in order to complete the 10-beat line of iambic pentameter. The author is saying to the actor, this word has more impact on this character than any other word that he or she is speaking at this moment. The examples of this in the canon are, dare I say, multitudinous. Yes, I did. I went there. Most versions of today's script, in fact, place the accent marks right in there in the text to indicate the stressed syllable for the reader or the actor. But every actor has to learn to do their line-by-line syllable count in order to find the delivery directions embedded with each line of the text. That's the homework of Shakespearean performance. That's the work actors must do in order to be properly informed how to perform the scene. And it goes beyond that. It is also a mechanism used to help convey information about the relationship between certain characters. Get this, for instance, in Romeo and Juliet, how a character says Romeo's name tells you multitudinous amounts of information about their relationship to him. Whether a character uses 2 or 3 syllables to say Romeo's name. Lady Montague. Oh, where is Romeo? Saw you him today? Right glad I am he was not at this fray. Romeo says, Tut, I have lost myself. I am not here. This is not Romeo. He's some otherwhere. Mercutio. Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance. In all 3 of those instances, his name is pronounced Rome-yo. 2 syllables, which speaks familiarity. Of course, he refers to himself as Romeo. Of course, his best friend Mercutio refers to him as Romeo. Of course, his mother refers to him as Romeo. It's like a nickname. Some people call me Steve. My mother used to call me Stevie Tom. Yes, I said it. Now you all know. That's my nickname. My mother used to call me Stevie Tom. And P.S., she's the only one allowed to do... No, actually, that's not true. My sister still calls me Stevie Tom, too. She's allowed to call me Stevie Tom. But only characters who don't know Romeo call him Romeo. Later, Lord Capulet says, young Romeo, is it? Using all 3 syllables. That's brilliant, isn't it? Just brilliant. Is the audience sitting there going, oh, she only used 2 syllables? Of course they're not. They're not cognitively in their front temporal lobe recognizing these subtle differences, but somewhere in the back of the brain, subconsciously they are, and it all layers on to the characters that they're watching. This same principle of scansion tells us that Jaques is in fact Jaques and not Jacques. It's in the scansion, and we see it in Act 2, Scene 1 of As You Like It. The First Lord says, "Indeed, my lord, the melancholy Jaques grieves at that, and in that kind swears you do more usurp than doth your brother that hath banished you." If he doesn't use 2 syllables, Jaques, it doesn't complete the 10-beat line. That leads me to the next rule in performing Shakespeare. It has to do with names. Billboard names. Yes, like a radio announcer. Billboard names. Our author makes sure to point out names of people to the audience, especially right when or right before we meet a new character. It helps us keep track of people. He knows it can be hard to keep track of all the characters in some of his plays, especially the history plays, where he has nearly every character incessantly address every other character by name, even though most of them have more than one name. But, his audiences understood that, and they understood that people had names, and then they had their titles, which were also their names, but weren't really their names as in the Christian names, but were their titles. So people called them by their titles, but a title is actually a name. Anyway, I digress. But that's the problem with some of those history plays. That wasn't a problem for the audiences of the day. What was a problem is that there were 40-something characters in some of these plays, and it helped if somebody introduced them, said their name, and they do so at nearly every greeting or in each scene. Look for that the next time you read any part of Henry IV or Henry VI, and you'll see what I mean. The next rule to acting Shakespeare: partial verse lines indicate action. Usually entrances, exits, offstage sounds, as we mentioned before, or in soliloquies and monologues, they can represent major changes in thought. Remember, there is no such thing as missing beats. They are there for a reason. Here's a great example from Act 5, Scene 5 of Macbeth. Macbeth says, "Life's but a shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. Is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing." Now the stage direction says, "Enter a messenger." Then Macbeth says, "Thou comest to use thy tongue, thy story quickly." The previous line, signifying nothing. That's 6 beats. There's 4 empty beats. No, there's not. There's 4 beats for the messenger to enter. During that 4 beats, Macbeth's indelible words are allowed to sink into our minds while the messenger has that time to enter. One of the most famous pieces from the play. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. P.S. Nothing is arbitrary with this writer. Not one beat. Not one beat. But let's look at the opposite of stressed syllables and missing beats. We call that elision. We see it all the time in Shakespeare. Usually he does it for us with an apostrophe here and apostrophe there. But on occasion, that line with that 11th beat doesn't really have an 11th beat. It requires elision. And just as he will give us clues about words he wants us to stress, such as banished, He also gives us clues about when he wants us to elide a word, such as every instead of every. That's a really common one, by the way. There's a great example in Act 1, Scene 3 of All's Well That Ends Well that also represents a speech pattern for the Countess when she is in urgent earnest. The Countess says, that truth should be suspected. Speak. Is't so? If't be so, you have wound a goodly clue. If't be not, forswear't. Howe'er, I charge thee. As heaven shall work in me for thine avail, tell me truly. That's heavy elision there in that passage. Is't so, if't be so, if't be not, forswear't, howe'er, as heaven. Each of those words are elided in order to make the passage scan. It becomes a speech pattern. She is in urgent earnest. Tell me quickly, right now. She's chopping words down in order to get it out because the message is so important. Brilliant, isn't it? By the way, just so you know, sometimes extra beats without an identifiable word to elide, and there are instances of that. I have actors come to me and go, what word am I supposed to cut here? What word am I supposed to elide? I don't know what to do here. And sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes there's not a logical choice there. Sometimes it's 11 beats. Sometimes it's 12 beats. That's on purpose too. It's there to break up the rhythm of the dialogue. It's there to specifically chop the meter. It's to offset the conscience of the listening audience. The author wants to jar us there for some reason. And he's telling the actor that with the extra beats in the line. Famous moment. Let's count it. To be or not to be, that is the question. Count it. To be or not to be. That is the question. Even eliding the word question to 2 syllables, you get 11 beats. Now, you could make it 12 beats. You could say, that is the question. Maybe that's the author's intent, is that he wants the word question to be drawn out after that string of monosyllabic words that have so much weight. Would it be weird for the author to intend that a character like Hamlet break the verse, break the meter? Of course not. Brilliant. It's brilliant. See, this is why actors love this guy. And this is why actors who get informed of this kind of stuff and then learn about Edward de Vere immediately go, okay, no guy from Stratford could have been this brilliant, this meticulous, known all of the stuff that's in these plays, and then also written it like this to inform actors this way. This is profound genius on a level that is beyond most polymaths in history, I would say. And so you see, every line, not every line, must be scanned and mined for the author's direction on how it should be delivered. But there's more to the genius. So much more. Which brings me to my absolute favorite of them all, Caesare. Caesare pauses in the rhythm of a line, usually signaled by a mark of punctuation. It's important to note that commas do not count here. So when we're looking for Caesare in the Shakespearean canon, we're talking about periods, colons, semicolons, hyphens, question marks, exclamation points. All of those are Caesare. Our author uses Caesare like a master of stagecraft. Each and every Caesare in the canon is there to tell the actor, do something right here. Or sometimes something happens right here. Sometimes the Caesara, singular of Caesare, Sometimes the caesura in the line is not even the action point of the character who is speaking, but rather an action point of another character who is on the stage. Sometimes, on occasion, it's an occurrence off the stage that can be heard or can be seen by the characters on the stage looking off stage. Sometimes these actions are subtle, a change in direction of movement, a change in address from one character to a different character while speaking. Sometimes they're highly dramatic, the crowning of a king, a cough, a wail, a tear, a striking of another character. They are all there, and it's one of the most brilliant aspects of the writing. If you're following along at home, boys and girls, turn back to Jaques' famous monologue in Act 2, Scene 7 of As You Like It. I use this example because it's not so dramatic. It's not the striking of another character, but it demonstrates stage direction to the actor of when to specifically change physicality to convey what is happening in this famous monologue. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrels, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Now, where are the caesurae? Look back at the speech if you have it in front of you. If not, listen in and I'll tell you where they land. They land after the word ages. His acts being 7 ages, period. And now he's about to describe the infant. The author tells the actor, be ready to do something here to describe this next age that you are about to convey. The next one is school. Right before he's about to describe the lover, make a physical change. The next one is eyebrow. Right before he's about to describe a soldier, make a physical change. The next one is mouth. Right before he's about to describe the justice with fair round belly, make a physical change. The next one is part. Right before he's about to describe the slippered pantaloon, make a physical change. And the last one is sound. Right before he's about to get very melancholy and deliver the last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. P.S. That's what we all have to look forward to. Some of us sooner than later. If we're lucky, I guess that's all we have to look forward to. Sure beats the alternative, I guess. But for another example of caesurae, let's go back to Macbeth's speech from Act 1, Scene 7. Yeah, flip the pages. This one is loaded with caesurae because the author wants the actor to be like a restless tiger caged in by what he is contemplating. And remember those buts ands, and besides, those key words we covered already in this speech. See how the author uses these in conjunction with the Caesare to help inform the actor. If 'twere done, when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, that but his brow might be the be-all and the end all. Here, but here, upon this bank and school of time, we jump the life to come. But in these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plagued inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. Then, as his host, who should against his murder shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other side. That's a piece of masterful text there. And look at, as we pointed out, the buts, the ands, the thens, the besides, and then find your Caesare. There's a colon after quickly. There's a colon after success. There's a period after all. There's a period after come. There's a period after lips. There's a colon after deed. There's a period after myself, a semicolon after meek. There's a period after wind. That's a lot of Caesare in one soliloquy, and it's meant to make the actor have to shift from thought to thought, from side to side even, maybe, in argument with himself, almost Jekyll and Hyde in some aspects, as you were. That's what the author can do for the actor if the actor knows what to look for. Here's a beautiful one. It's Helena's soliloquy from Act 2, Scene 2 of All's Well That Ends Well. In this moment, Helena has just received the most rejecting and devastating letter from Bertram. We talked about it earlier. When she reads this letter, it's in the presence of her mother-in-law and some others. So she's forced to conceal her emotion by making light of the phrasing construction. Her mother-in-law, the Countess, realizes Helena's pain and self-control and hastens the others from the room in a heavily elided piece we covered earlier. She does this so that Helena can be alone, to spare her the struggle of restraining her grief. And once alone, Helena breaks down. She weeps and sobs and cries out. And the whens and the wheres of those actions are all placed there in the soliloquy for the actor to follow, including, by the way, a rhyming couplet at the end to signify her exit when it's over. Till I have no wife, I have nothing in France. Nothing in France until he has no wife. Thou shalt have none, Ocean, none in France. Then hast thou all again. Poor Lord, is't I that chased thee from thy country and exposed those tender limbs of thine to the event of the non-sparing war? And is it I that drive thee from the sportive court where thou wast shot at with fair eyes to be the mark of spoky muskets? Oh, you leaden messengers that ride upon the violent speed of fire, fly with false aim, move the steel-peering air that sings with piercing, do not touch my lord. Whoever shoots at him, I set him there. Whoever charges on his forward breast, I am the caitiff that do hold him to't. And though I kill him not, I am the cause his death was so affected. Better 'twere I met the raving lion when he roared with sharp constraint of hunger. Better 'twere that all the miseries which nature owes were mine at once. No, come home thou, Roscion, whence honor but of danger wins a scar, as oft it loses all. I will be gone. My being here it is that holds thee hence. Shall I stay here to do't? No. No, although the air of paradise did fan the house, and angels officed all. I will be gone, that pitiful rumor may report my flight to consolate thine ear. Come, night and day, for with the dark poor thief I'll steal away. Incredible, isn't it? Look at the spots where she's instructed to weep, to cry, to breathe, to gasp. They're in there. If you're looking at home, they're in there. If you're not, take a pause. Go find your book. Take a look at that beautiful speech. Ask yourself if you've ever seen it performed. And if you have, if you've ever seen it performed properly. Now, I know we're running long for this episode, but I also know that many of you listen to your favorite podcasts in multiple sittings. Some half on the way to work, the other half on the way home, some in pieces each day during your morning workout. Some of you have sent me flattering messages saying that you actually go back and listen to some episodes a second and a third time. That's sweet of you. Usually it's because of the guest and what the guest has to say, though. And you want to get those details a second time. But for the sake of expedience, let's quickly cover some of the other mechanisms our author uses to provide direction to his actors. They are shared verse lines, enjambment, lengths of sentences, and strings of monosyllabic words. Shared verse lines are exactly that. They are places where the author is telling the actors to jump on each other's cues, share the rhythm of the line, move the scene along. They are commonly places of urgency, conflict, or witty banter, such as is found between many of the characters in, say, The Taming of the Shrew, or between Beatrice and Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing. Enjambment is when lines continue through to the next line without punctuation or with only commas at the end of the line of verse, mostly for brief breaths. Follow the enjambment. Nothing is worse than listening to actors end stop at the end of every line, or even worse, to play the sing-song of the rhymes in the poetry. You'd be surprised how hard it is to break actors of that in a play such as A Midsummer Night's Dream, where there is so much rhyming poetry involved. If people want to listen to you recite poetry, they'll listen to you recite poetry. They're not going to go see a play. That's not why they're there to see a play. Lengths of sentences. When our author gives you a long sentence, he is saying, speed this up, move this along, get this information out, earn your pauses, and drive to the moment of impact where the sentences become shorter as a clue to then slow things down. I always tell actors to rush to the tragedy so that they don't have to rush through the tragedy. It's the same with comedy. Rush to it, not through it. And strings of monosyllabic words are a clue to the actor to give them weight. Duke Theseus tells Hermia, "Take time to pause." Hamlet asks, "To be or not to be?" That is the question. And here at the end of Helena's soliloquy, she says, "Come night and day, for with the dark poor thief I'll steal away." There's another Shakespearean mechanism in the Helena piece that must not be overlooked. I like to call them Shakespeare's giant O's. These are not words. These are another form of instructing the actor. They say, emote here. Giant O's are hardly ever supposed to be pronounced as a common O, as in OH. If they were, he would have put an H there. They are meant to be a sound of emotion that is often not properly expressed with an O, as in, "Oh, you don't say," but as in O, as in, "Oh!" Helena, of smoky muskets? Oh, you leaden messengers that ride upon the violent speed of fire. Rosaline. Oh, they'd take the part of a better wrestler than myself. Celia. Oh, my poor Rosaline, whither wilt thou go? Lady Macbeth. Oh, never shall sun that morrow see. 4 O's, 4 different sounds, 4 different feelings, 4 different forms of expression. These are moments of elation or disgust, pain, love, frustration, scheming, outrage, you name it. It is a license from the author to the actor to feel and express something powerful in the moment. It's like in King Lear when the text says, "Howl, howl, howl." Could you imagine a King Lear who comes out on stage going, "Howl, howl, howl"? No, it's not literal, and neither are the O's. They're not literal. They are a form of musical composition to express to the player how to play the note. Think of them that way. And this is why I like to tell actors, when Shakespeare gives you a giant O, you should always enjoy it. Yes, that was a body joke. Yes, we'll get to those very soon as we wrap this up. More to come, more to come. But first, just a few other quick notes. Repeats. Remember, when the author has more than 31,000 words to choose from, if he chooses to give a character the same word in repetition, he does it on purpose for dramatic effect. 31,000 words. He gives you the same word 3 times in a row. That's on purpose. There's a reason. It's not, "Oh, I forgot another word I could use here." Or, I've run out of 31,000 words to use. Or, I've already used that one 18 times in the canon. I probably shouldn't use it again here. No, if there's a repetition there, it is there for very specific dramatic effect, as in howl, howl, howl. Or tomorrow. And tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time. Or words. That's another excellent one I've already used today. And what about lists and building on lists? Many of Shakespeare's characters use lists of metaphors, anecdotes, and grand euphuism to make their arguments. Oftentimes, we see directors cutting down major speeches of this nature in a play in order to shorten the runtime of the play. Well, he already said that 3 different ways. Let's cut that. But that's the point. The character's argument is so important to them that they feel the need to say it 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 different ways, each way bigger and broader and more euphuistic than the last. And then sometimes lists are actually just lists. It's true. Such as when Macbeth is talking about different breeds of dog in Act 3, Scene 1. Aye, in the catalogue you go for men, as hounds and greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, curs, choughs, water rugs, and demi-wolves are all clept all by the name of dogs. The valued file distinguishes the swift, the slow, the subtle, the housekeeper, the hunter, every one according to the gift which bounteous nature hath in him closed, whereby he does receive particular addition. Is he simply showing off his knowledge of canines? Of course not. He is using this metaphor to compare men to dogs of different types, and it is important that the actor deliver the line with the knowledge of what each type of dog means to the character. Otherwise, it sounds like a laundry list at a kennel. And the point that he is using, that the qualities of men are as diverse as the quality of breeds of dog used for different things by men, that would be lost on the audience. So, we got through those quickly. And now, finally, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you have all been waiting for. My one final rule of acting Shakespeare. If it sounds bawdy, then it is bawdy. Period. Is that a sex joke? Yes. Is he referring to her private parts? Yes. Oh, is that a penis reference? Absolutely yes. If you suspect a line is filled with innuendo, then guess what? P.S. It is filled with innuendo. Make no bones about it. See what I did there? Make no bones about it. Penis jokes abound. Vagina references are prevalent everywhere. Even jokes about sex toys can be found in the Shakespearean canon. It's a rated R anthology, ladies and gentlemen. One of my favorites comes from Much Ado About Nothing. When the servant girl Margaret says to Benedict, "Give us the swords, we have bucklers of our own." In this one line, the author explains the entire character. Her penis envy, her unhappiness at being a lowly servant girl in a man's world, and her ambition to rise above her station in the only way she can in that world, which is by attaching herself to a man, which is why she gets involved with Borachio and ends up part of the entire nothing that the play is about, and the false identity of hero. Our feminist writer, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, Shakespeare is one of the earliest feminist writers. Fight me on it. I will invite anyone on to the podcast to have this discussion. This feminist writer uses this play to share this message of gender inequality multiple times throughout that genius of a play. Much Ado About Nothing is one of the finest and most perfect plays ever written. And that's one of the reasons. And if you don't believe that is enough, that Margaret reference, then don't forget the reference where Beatrice says, "Oh, that I were a man. That I were a man, I would eat his heart in the marketplace." And what is she so angry about? She's angry that she's not allowed to go fight her own battle, that she needs Benedict to challenge Claudio over what he has done to her cousin Hero. Margaret is a little more crude about it, as we shall say. We want to talk about crude. Look at the Porter's speech in Act 2, Scene 3 of Macbeth. The references there are less pointed, but absolutely undeniable about the effects of alcohol on a man's performance in bed. Yeah, it takes off. It takes off the wanting, right? I'm paraphrasing because I don't have that text right in front of me. Shame on me. As You Like It. So full of body humor with references for almost nearly every character in the play. Most of them are very phallic in nature. I mean, the title is as you like it. And that in itself is a giant innuendo that describes the comedy all too well, meaning if it works best in your relationship, in your household, whatever. For the woman to wear the pants in the family, what's that to me? I don't care. As you like it. Live and let live. However, the author also uses the title to give himself some very fun license with what we would call ribald, or in modern terms, blue humor today. Let's look at the character Touchstone. The very name Touchstone, with stone being slang for testicle. Oh, so his name is Touch Testicle. Is he always fondling himself? Well, this tells us how bawdy the courtly clown of the story is going to be. And he has many, many ribald references, especially to the female anatomy. Perhaps even the author being self-reflecting in so many ways, showing us Touchstone as a lecherous womanizer, making it then all the more humorous when he falls undoubtedly in love with this simple and crude shepherd girl, Audrey. In Act 2, Scene 4 of the play, Touchstone talks about his very first sexual experience with Jane Smile. And he uses the most ribald terms and yet beautifully pastoral imagery, so perfectly capturing the essence of the setting of the play and the joke within the joke that the play is. In Act 3, Scene 2, he goes for the gold. And I mean for the gold in his mockery of Orlando's verses to Rosaline. It gets about as bawdy as it can get there, depending upon your personal sensibilities. But if you're following along at home, boys and girls, take a look and I'll parse it for the rest of us. Basically, he says, if a buck needs a doe, seek out Rosalind. Then if a tomcat seeks a mate, so does Rosalind. Next, even worse, with lining being slang for stuffing, as in to fill or cover on the inside. And he says, Rosaline must be lined or stuffed on the inside. Next, even worse, she's chattel, which is a common theme with Touchstone. And in that day and age, prostitutes were literally carted through towns as a punishment so that the upstanding women of the town could throw rotten vegetables at them. And he says here that Rosalind should go to cart. He's calling her a lusty whore. His use of the word nut is very interesting. Is it a seed or is it something of trifling value? It is bookended with some of the bawdiest and bluest lines of them all. And remember, lists must build, so the actor here needs to be delivering each joke with a little more punch and a little more punch and a little more punch. And here the sixth couplet in the sequence thrusts the metaphor home. See what I did there? He says, if you are seeking the sweetest rose, you will find love's prick and Rosaline, as in they will be together conjoined physically, not in the church. He's called her out on her charade without actually revealing her. This is a giant wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the likes of which were so prevalent in the Elizabethan age. And I would argue there was a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudge going on about the true identity of the author of Shakespeare. It was an open secret that many people knew, but you didn't talk about it. You didn't acknowledge it because you could lose your head. And finally, in Act 1, Scene 1 of All's Well That Ends Well, Parolles. Oh, Parolles. You want to talk about body? Yeah, he's a dude. He goes into an entire diatribe, which is broken with some of Helena's retorts, but nonetheless an entire treatise that gets worse and worse with direct sexual insults to Helena that no woman should ever have to endure. He gets severely worse. And what's interesting is we suddenly see the language shift as though it is aimed at a much older woman when he compares her virginity to a withered pear. It looks ill. It eats dryly, he says. Read what you will into that one. Question. Is the author taking a stab? I did it again. I can't resist myself. Is the author taking a stab at the Virgin Queen herself? Who could possibly get away with that? I ask you, a country bumpkin from Stratford? Not likely. So, let's quickly review before we conclude our crash course in understanding Shakespeare, the stage director, and the keys he gives actors to performing his works. 1. Why am I saying these words now? Remember his neologism. 2. Allow the meter of the lines to inform your delivery. Remember the beats. There's no such thing as a missing beat. Find the stressed syllables. Look for the elision. Find the character's argument in every speech. They're not always arguing with each other, but they're always making an argument to convince someone of something. But and yet are key words lending stress to argument and shifts in rhetoric. Always stress the word now. Always stress the word all. Everything. Play the wit and find the depth of emotions beneath it. Partial verse lines indicate action or changes in thought. Monosyllabic words indicate stress across the line. Shared verse lines are pickups, top each other's lines, share the meter. Longer sentences generally mean speed up. Shorter sentences mean slow down. Lists must build as they develop. Repeats require build. Billboard names. And finally, when something in Shakespeare sounds naughty, it is. Period. It is. There. That's it. You've got it. Thank you for allowing me to share this artistic insight into the works of our author. I hope I have opened the door to some reasons why theater artists love these works so much and helped you to a better understanding of another layer of artistic brilliance that is to be found inside the works of Shakespeare. And I'll leave you with this today. Many of these rules to acting Shakespeare are highly subjective. And even if you dispute one or two of these interpretations, you cannot dispute them all. My argument is that they are each an indicator of a writer-director, a man who understood the stage better than most who have ever walked the boards. Some would argue that that doesn't preclude William of Stratford. They like to claim that he was an actor. They like to claim a lot of things. But I'm going to tell you that when you put all this together, along with the other layers of evidence that we commonly explore and discover on this program through our many guests, this is just one more link in the chain, one more piece of the puzzle, one more brushstroke on the painting. How many more times can I say it? Can I do a good Shakespeare list here? That was 3. What else can I come up with? One more silk screen on the t-shirt. No, that's a terrible one. Okay, reject that one. I need to get, okay, first draft. I'll rewrite it. That was the first quarto edition. I'll come back with a better edition later. Fellow Quillers, thank you for joining me on this journey. As I always say, wherever you are listening and whenever you are listening, I appreciate you for being a loyal Quiller. Don't forget to write to me at contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. That's contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. Send me your ideas, send me your critiques, send me your praise. This was lofty. And more importantly, as always, remember, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.